Hi, and welcome to Chapter 28, Learning Objective 3, where we're going to take a look at the other really important unemployment data besides the unemployment rate, and this would be the labor participation rate. So let's go ahead and I'll share my screen with you. Okay. Okay, that's a little strange. Okay. This is weird. All right, so we're going to calculate the labor force participation rate in a given scenario. And let me go ahead and start my slideshow. Okay, so the labor force participation rate is the total adult population that is working or is employed or unemployed, because remember that's what we defined as the labor force. So employed plus unemployed. All right, so the fraction that is going to participate in the labor market, even though you're unemployed, you're still looking for work, okay? So here, calculate the labor force participation rate using the following data. Okay, so remember, for the labor force participation rate, we're going to take the number of people employed plus the number of people unemployed to get the labor force. So when we did that, we ended up with, let's see, 145.9 plus 8.5, and that was 154.40, 4 million. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the not in the labor force to the number that we've got for the labor force to get the adult population. So I'm going to add 79.2 to the 154.4, and that gives me a total of 233.6 million. And so all I did was add in, whoops, sorry, let me just, all I did was add in, okay, the 79.2, not in the labor force, to get, and this would be our adult population, 23.6. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is take the 230, I'm going to take the labor force, 154.4 labor force, divide that by the 233.6, multiply that by 100 and express it as a percentage. So when we do that, we end up with the labor force. We already did the unemployment rate. And so taking the numbers that I just calculated a moment ago, we end up with adult population of 233.6 divided by, and let me go back and pick up our labor force, 154.4. 154.4 times 100 is going to equal our labor force participation rate, 0.4, divided by 233.6, and that's going to give us 66.10%. So what that means is approximately 66 people out of 100 are participating in the labor force. So here's the calculations. Again, what we did was we took that labor force, the one that we calculated previously in a different objective, but it's also the number of people employed plus unemployed. Okay, and then we added in the people that are not in the labor force to get the adult population. Labor force participation rate is the labor force from above in our previous objective divided by the population times 100 expressed as a percentage. Okay, so here's some other examples of labor force participation rates. And so how much of that, how many people, you can look at it in 10 or 100, whichever you prefer, are working. So one of the things that we know is the labor force participation rate does differ according to different characteristics, I think is the best way to put it. So if we talk about ethnicity, that is definitely one. We talk about age, that is definitely one. We also can talk about educational levels. And so again, just taking a look at some of the differences that we have here, and this is for the US population of 2018. So among those, we see the highest labor force participation rate in white males. We see the lowest in white females in terms of the labor force participation rates. Among teens, we can look at that as well. And we see the lowest numbers of Black teens labor force participation rate. And we see the highest number in white females labor force participation rate. So one of the things that we've looked at is gender, because I should have added that to the last slide in terms of ways that we can segregate data to take a look at labor market experience. So one of the things that we see is there's lower rates of labor force participation among women than there are men. One of the reasons for this is because women tend to leave the labor force among childbearing ages of 25 to 54 to leave the labor force for a particular or maybe an extended period of time to raise children. That's one reason. And one of the things that we know, though, is that if we have higher educational levels among the individual women, then what we're going to say is it provides a greater opportunity cost for leaving the labor force. Okay. Again, some of the different experiences among blacks, among teenagers that we see among the labor force participation rates. Again, taking a look at the difference between gender, we saw huge differences in the 1950s when traditional male-female roles or male-female roles were more traditionally defined, and we see that gap closing, although we still know that there is a wage gap. And if you read about the reasons economically for the wage gap, talks a lot about the idea of leaving the workforce for a period of time, particularly when kids are younger, the opportunity cost of working versus affording childcare. Many times it doesn't pay to work because all of your money is going toward childcare expenses. And economists really study the idea of re-entering the labor force after leaving the labor force for an extended period of time. So let's say that you're 25, you leave the labor force to have a child or two, you try to re-enter at 28. There's a skills issue because 3 years of eroding skills are one of the things that we see. Pretty exciting about that, though, is that online education, things like you're doing currently, can help to ensure that those skills do not erode within that 3-year time period. Okay, so again, when we take a look at the difference between the participation rates in, say, the 1950s, this is kind of what we saw. And then in 2018, some really bigger differences as roles were breaking with gender norms. Roles are fluid, I guess I want to say that, because many times it's not based upon gender who stays home to provide childcare. And so you're seeing some of those differences in the participation rates. Okay, so again, taking a look at gender differences, and again, counted as being out of the labor force, things like full-time students and stay at home, whoever that role might be attributable to. Okay, that's the end of this particular learning objective, and I will see you back next time in learning objective 4 for chapter 28. Thanks, have a great day.